It's the Week 10 edition of the Occupy Fantasy Podcast, season long. It's Walid. I'm here with Brian. I'm back. Not that anyone has missed me or cares for that matter.
Bro, we got all kinds of comments asking where you were, so glad you're back.
I mean, for anyone that's been keeping up with baseball, obviously the Nats have, they've been a little busy, and by default, I've had some busy evenings as well. Brian, I appreciate you, for granting me this unpaid time off.
Hey, we're a flexible work schedule company, so yeah, go do your thing. Now you're back, and now you're ready to work. So
And
feel
it's Week 10. Can you believe it? Double digits.
it's kind of crazy. I was thinking about it today. It's, as the grind continues for producing content, it's kind of sad that we're over halfway through the regular season, and it seems like in the blink of an eye we'll be through the playoffs and the Super Bowl.
But the trade-off is, we got other sports in full swing, NHL, NBA. We got
Yes.
content there, and that's not going to go away for quite some time.
Yeah, it's a cycle, right? Well, you and I will be talking about NHL every day, and obviously the other sports as well. And then again, as soon as we blink our eyes, NFL will be back, and preseason will be here. So,
Well, let's jump straight into business here. Free agent pickups, waiver wire targets for this week.
yeah, so it's not very common that we get a couple running back names, but this week I think 4 or 5 guys we could probably pick up, depending on the depths of your league. But lead, I don't know about you, but Kenyon Drake may be available in some people's leagues, especially depending on the timing because they played last Thursday night. In some leagues, you can't pick up guys who played Thursday night, and he was
Right.
traded a couple days before. So I think David Johnson's going to be back, but Kenyon Drake looked pretty good in that offense.
Well, I was one of those idiots that drafted Kenyon Drake, and I held him on my bench the entire season until he came in handy. So, I think some folks, some leagues, he will be available in that situation, but probably a guy that, given his role, he was still a technically starting running back going into this season. These guys are hard to find,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't surprise me if he's around. If he is, even if you get 1 week value out of him, I mean, we saw what that amounted to last week, like 26 points.
Yep. Yeah, no, totally worth it. And speaking of guys that people have held all year and then dropped pretty recently, maybe somebody has no longer been able to hold on to Kareem Hunt, who's now back after suspension. So he's another guy I have an eye out for. But I think Chris and I talked about him last week, actually. But I'd love to get your thoughts on what your expectations are for Hunt.
Well, obviously the Browns, it's not like they need to stick to anything that's been working, right? Um, and despite Nick Chubb's effectiveness, it seems like they're gonna get Kareem Hunt involved. Hilliard's been getting what, like 30% of snaps the last 2 weeks, so
Yep.
there is a role to be had now. Kareem Hunt is incredibly talented, but given what we've seen from this Browns O line, from Baker Mayfield, and just the game scripts they've been in, kind of, it's a high likely outcome that he's not going to save your fantasy season.
Right.
But with that said, who knows?
That's true. And Freddie Kitchens' comments today, for those of you who aren't aware, we're recording this Wednesday evening. Freddie Kitchens said that Nick Chubb's not a selfish player. We'll do what we can, kind of hinting at a running back by committee coming. But like you said,
Right.
the overall ceiling of this offense hasn't been that high. Um, I'm glad you're back this week because there's another guy who is not your boy, but Bruce
He's my
Arians.
boy now.
Bruce Arians has come on board, and that's Ronald Jones.
And dude, it's okay. Number one, we know Bruce Arians doesn't care about running backs, right?
Right.
Number two, we knew going into this season that this backfield isn't exactly one that you're gonna like buy heavy in. You might spend a late draft pick and hope either Peyton Barber or Rojo uh, get enough volume and opportunity that turns into something. But really, number three, we've seen Ronald Jones deliver effective performances where we thought, okay, he might be the guy now, right? And it seems like this is the first time Bruce Arians said he is the starter. But like, what does that really mean to you if second quarter next week, he's splitting carries with Peyton Barber and like
That's true. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't surprise anyone, I don't think, because there's it's a pass heavy offense anyways, and given Ronald Jones' history and given Bruce Arians' history, I don't think that would surprise anyone that in a couple weeks from now Peyton Barber's leading this backfield. So I think it's still worth picking up Ronald Jones and hope that Bruce Arians is right and that he's going to get a majority of the carries. But I guess we'll see.
I think he's the safest guy out of, between Kenyon Drake, Kareem Hunt, and him.
Yeah,
He's the guy that will probably have the most impactful weeks for the rest of the season.
true.
I'm not saying that his ceiling is the highest, but you know, I don't see him disappearing in 3-4 weeks or like just simply having a role where he's getting 5 carries, which I could see for Kenyon Drake and Kareem Hunt. But once again, like it's it's like a revolving door, and I get that we're talking free agents. So usually, if you have bye weeks, injuries, you just have things that are forcing your hand here. And I'm cool with Ronald Jones, but don't go overboard and manage your expectations.
Yeah, and it depends on what your team needs too, right? Like if you need a solid running back for the rest of the season, you have injuries or whatever it may be, then you might want to pick him up. Whereas if you're pretty stacked at running back and you're looking for a flyer who could become something really great, then maybe Hunt or Kenyon Drake is your guy. But speaking of guys who might be helpful to your team this week, Le'Veon Bell has a bit of a knee injury. Not entirely sure what it was. They said no structural damage, but his availability is in doubt for Week 10. So, Lee, that means potentially Ty Montgomery or Bilal Powell getting the majority of the touches.
Yeah, and I mean I'm getting mixed reports, right? Anytime you hear them say, "Oh, no structural damage," the fact that that's what they're looking at, you're like, okay, they'll take precaution, right? They're not going to rush him back. But then, you read another, beat writers say, "Hey, they're optimistic that he'll be ready to go versus the Giants." So it could go any which way. And if Le'Veon Bell plays, both of these guys, Ty Montgomery and Bilal Powell, are absolutely irrelevant.
Right.
But with that said, why would the Giants? I mean, why would the Jets rush him?
Because they don't know what they're doing. So
Because they're stupid. Yeah.
But that.
I've always been a Bilal Powell fan, but he just hasn't seemed to have much of a role in this offense this year. And I mean, if I had to, what? This year he has 9 carries for 39 yards. Right. I think he's probably better than Ty Montgomery, but I think Montgomery's going to be the first guy to get a crack at getting the carries.
Yeah, and even like dating back to preseason when Le'Veon didn't play, Montgomery was getting every snap with the first team. I don't think that's changed much either here. So, but then again, it's not like Le'Veon's been lighting up with fantasy numbers in this offense anyway. So why would we expect much more from Ty Montgomery?
Right. And Kalen Ballage, I cannot believe we are talking about him again.
If you watch
Mark Walton, geez.
Yeah, If you need a really bad running back in the worst situation, that's what fantasy is all about, right? So yeah, Mark Walton no longer there. He's suspended. Kenyon Drake traded. It's the Kalen Ballage show now. And if you watch any cut-ups on Twitter of Kalen Ballage's pass catching abilities, then you're not going to want to spend any of your free agent money on him.
Yeah, it's all in all. I mean, you look at these 5 guys. Kenyon Drake, I think he has the most short-term, lightning in a bottle ability. Ronald Jones is that guy who he should be rostered anyway in my eyes because he's been involved and he's going to continue to be involved in this offense. And he's probably the least. I think his range of outcomes is the least volatile. Kareem Hunt, total unknown. We were all thinking he'd come back in a scenario where the Browns are good and it's like another weapon to add to this dynamic offensive attack. It couldn't be any different. So big question mark there. And this Jets backfield, Dolphins backfield, I mean, you're literally looking at guys that you're praying get you 7 points PPR. If these dudes got you 7-8 points, you'd take it.
Times are tough. Yeah, that's exactly what you're hoping for. Yeah, but I think okay, so we talked about running backs. There is a receiver, I think, out there, especially for this week, whose ceiling is a little bit higher than 7 points, and that's Josh Reynolds. Chris and I talked about him last week with Brandon Cooks. We weren't sure about his availability, but Lead, it sounds like they're taking it careful with Brandon Cooks. They don't want – I mean, this dude's had a ton of concussions and some scary-looking ones this year, so –
And I mean, Reynolds was effective last week. I think he had 8 targets, caught 3 of them for 73 and a touch.
Yep.
But let me ask you this: I mean, we saw with Cooper Cup out last year, and how much the Rams love those 11 personnel packages. He got and towards the end of the season, he got a lot of run, but he didn't really blow us away. He found a way to get in the end zone a couple times, but like convince me that this isn't going to be another one of those like receivers that lets us down.
Yeah, I guess there's no guarantee. And receiver is pretty deep. I think you can always find receivers on the waiver wire. And I think even some other guys I was going to ask you about that who still may be out there if your waivers haven't processed this week. Guys like Zach Pascal, Devontae Parker, who have immediate roles, and then maybe Andy Isabella, who may be freed after breaking out Thursday night. So I guess all those guys are in the mix too, and it's not like Reynolds is that much better than those guys potentially this
No,
week or beyond.
no, I dig all of them. I mean, Pascal, I call him Pascal. Like, I try every time I was watching with Paige, and like they would mention he's getting a lot of work.
Yeah.
Anytime they would say Pascal, I'm like they're not respecting his name. It's Pascal.
Yeah.
But no, dude, he stepped in and he's really made a difference. Devontae Parker continues to be Devontae Parker, right? Just when you count him out, he has a big game, and now with Preston Williams out, should be more targets. And Andy Isabella, man, did he look explosive on that huge touchdown catch?
He must just be really behind on the playbook side of things. Like there's
Right.
no reason for that dude not to be getting all the snaps that Keyshawn and Demir Bird and all these other scrubs are getting.
Hmm.
So I really hope that was a kind of a jumping off point for him because it's clear this dude can play in this league and can have a role, especially in this offense. So I think
Oh,
he's worth a flyer if he's out there and you need a receiver.
absolutely. I mean, don't count on the snap count to drastically increase. I think Cliff Kingsbury made it pretty clearly. He said, "Hey, not really. This isn't going to change much
Yeah.
here. We know he's explosive, but he needs to continue to get better." But someone that, if you're in a keeper or dynasty league, might be worth targeting still.
Oh yeah, I mean if you're in a dynasty league and maybe not now after that big catch, but
Hmm.
maybe a couple more games where he's playing 8 or 10 snaps, the owner may be getting restless and worried. So just keep an eye on that situation because he does have long-term value, I think.
All right, let's talk survivor picks. If you are still alive going into week 10, give yourself a pat on the back. Well deserved. You continued to play the favorites, which is what we tell you to do, and keep things simple. And now you're going to be in a spot where you probably have to take some chances. Fortunately, this is a good week for that, given how many teams we have in good spots.
Yeah, the Saints -13 versus the Falcons. Very potentially, you haven't used the Saints yet. Baltimore -10 at Cincinnati. You might have
You
used
may have
Baltimore.
used them.
Yeah, especially week 2 against Arizona when they were big favorites. But I think the Colts, in our tried and true method, playing against the Dolphins, unless it's the Jets. You weren't taking 3-point favorite Jets last week,
Right,
but
right, right, right.
Colts 10.5 point favorites this week against the Dolphins, even with potentially their third string quarterback now. And the Colts make a ton of sense.
And how about just a shout? I know we talk about them all the time, but the lines makers, like, let's give them a shout out here. The fact that the Dolphins were, 3.5 point underdogs last week, and
Hmm.
most folks at a distance would look at it and say, "Oh, like the Dolphins are going 0-16."
Yeah.
Well, what do you know? Those two teams are just as bad as one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Never underestimate the power of Adam Gase.
Dude, he's the quarterback whisperer. Like, and you know what pisses me off? If he gets fired this
He'll
offseason,
get a job.
he's gonna get a job. Okay, Lord, if he gets a head coaching job, I am not watching the NFL next year. But he will get an offensive coordinator position,
I don't know why he will
and
though.
for some way in hell, like he's gonna get another coaching job in 3 years. Everyone's just gonna forget about all his other,
That's how it works.
previous tenures, and that's just how the old boy network works.
He's gonna wow them with his preparation and his minute by minute notes of every practice over the past 10 years. But they'll forget about his last ranked pace of play and his inept offenses.
Oh my God. All right, let's talk streaming quarterback options. There are a couple guys that are in good spots, and we do like looking at the occupy model from time to time, even though that factors more price points in. But you see guys like Ryan Tannehill once again up there. Brian Hoyer should get the start against the Dolphins, and I want to say Kyler Murray, but chances are he's probably on a roster.
We'll see. He was actually available kind of widely in some of my leagues after he
Mhm.
had two tough matchups. He did, go off against San Francisco, but I think a lot of people either dropped him or benched him for that matchup. So be on
Mhm.
the lookout because that's the matchup we look for against Tampa Bay, right? So Kyler, I think, would be my number one option. But then coming in against the Dolphins, Brian Hoyer, still competent as a passer, showed it when he stepped in last week against the Steelers. So I uh, I think those are the two clear favorites for me.
No, I think so. Um, any love for like Philip Rivers because he's been sitting on the waiver wire. I picked him up last week because I have quarterback issues. Haven't started him yet, but like, what are the matchups? Not great, but like, what are your thoughts?
I like him a lot this week, actually, just because he's had a string of matchups where the opposing defensive front has just been dominating as far as getting pressure on the quarterback goes, and we know that their offensive line is not the greatest. But this week against Oakland, Oakland ranks near the bottom of the league in pressure generated. So theoretically, Rivers should have way more time than he's had in recent weeks, which should mean big games, I think, for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams too.
I dig it. What about streaming defenses?
Got to go with the Colts against the Dolphins if they're there. I
Mhm.
assume maybe someone was ahead of you or you've already done it, but other options probably Ravens against backup quarterback Ryan Finley and the Bengals. Giants and Jets. I think you can go either side of that matchup. And then Browns and Bills. Bills are probably rostered, but you can go either side of that matchup too, I think.
Yeah. Help me out here. So I'm an Evan Ingram owner, right? And Q, my boy, who also helps us um, often with Occupy Fantasy, just on some of the web development stuff in my league, he sniffed a weakness and he's in my DM saying, "Hey, here's the conversation." He says, "Trade question mark?" I was like, "You tell me." He
Yeah.
says, "Well, it looks like Evan Ingram is hurt." I'm like, "Yup." He says, "So looks like you could use a tight end." I definitely could. So that is something I can definitely provide you with. Problem is, I really need a piece to help me win, not just bolster depth. You feel me? Like, who you got? He said, I have Waller and Hernandez. So he called Chris Herndon Hernandez. We
So,
don't need to go into detail. Said he put in a full practice today. And now I'm sitting here. I haven't responded to him. I said I got to record this podcast. I got to ask Brian,
there you go.
if I should do some business with you. But what am I to do? I got Evan Ingram. I feel like he's going to be back in 2 weeks, but at the same time, like I need to do something for this week. Is there any guy? I mean, like, and I'm talking about even below Jason Witten, right? Like that you would consider.
Yeah, that's a good question. Q's putting the pressure on you, so I do appreciate that for Q. What about Mike Gesicki? And this sounds nuts, but Preston Williams is out. Devontae
Mhm.
Parker has been the only receiver really, and Gesicki's been getting like low key a lot of work for this offense.
Oh yeah.
7 targets, 4 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets. Went off for 6 for 95 last week.
Oof.
And in that process, like tons of air yards too. Not even like check downs and near the line of scrimmage. They've been targeting him downfield. So as this season continues to crumble for Miami, they're going to continue to see what they have in Mike Gesicki. So I think you could do a lot worse than him.
No, I think so too. And like you said, the air yards, the targets, they're all there, and it's hard finding tight ends that get that work. And once again, with Preston Williams out, little opening on target share, and just him being on the Dolphins is going to have people continuously look past him.
Right.
So, and stepping in for Herndon the last few weeks has been Ryan Griffin, who's been effective, but I mean convince me it's not worth trading someone for Chris Herndon.
I think you can get by for the next 2 weeks. I probably wouldn't make the trade. I also suck at trades, so I don't know if that if that means anything. But I would go with Gesicki and whatnot unless because even Waller his volumes dropped a little bit
Mm-hmm.
in recent weeks, and Herndon we don't know if he's ever going to get back on the field with this fluke hamstring injury. So I don't know, man. I would roll the next 2 weeks from tight ends off the waiver wire, and then I do think Ingram will be back after the bye.
You heard it here first, Q. So don't sass me up
Sorry,
when
Q. Sorry, Q.
yeah, when we don't reach a deal. Yeah, let's jump into Twitter questions. And those of you that are not new here, you can holler at us anytime at Occupy Fantasy. Let us know what your questions are. I'm having some issues right now pulling them up, Brian. So would you mind setting the pace and throwing the questions my way? I'm going blindfolded here, so you'll really get my gut.
Perfect. Let's do that. So we got our boy, Mr. Leon Harris, longtime follower,
My guy, let's go.
DMV resident, says, should he drop Raquel Armstead back up for Leonard Fournette for Nick
Oof.
Foles? Because he has Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, so Leon's having some issues there at the quarterback position,
Mhm.
and
Totally.
he clarifies they've been trash. And
Mhm.
he does have Fournette though, so a handcuff for Armstead.
Right.
So what would you be doing here?
So I have Fournette too, and I have Armstead. And honestly, I would just look elsewhere to, I mean, even if it means dropping a quarterback, right? Rolling one quarterback. Um, like I would, the only way I would drop Armstead is if I feel like everyone else that I'm dropping is going to get picked up and I have no chance to
True.
kind of recoup my losses. Because in the event, God forbid, Leonard Fournette goes down, that you're talking about like a league winner, right? Going into the postseason, and then you're going to be like, "Damn, I did all that just for Nick Foles for a week." So I hear you. It's tough having a handcuff on your bench during a bye week. It feels like it's just sucking up your roster space, but
So is two
it's
quarterbacks though.
yeah, exactly. And to be honest, you drop Baker Mayfield, guess what? I doubt he's going anywhere. So, my gut, Mr. Leon Harris says hold Armstead. 90% chance it won't matter because Leonard Fournette, knock on wood, will continue to be indestructible. But by that chance that he does something happens, even if it's he tweaks his hamstring, week 13 and the Jaguars are like out of playoff contention, they might give this kid Armstead a chance because Fournette's a free agent this upcoming season and they want to see what this kid can do. So
Yep.
I'm holding.
I agree. I agree. Hold Armstead. If you do want to pick up Foles, drop one of your quarterbacks, Leon. And I think that's the answer to your issues there. All right, Lead. A couple offline questions we got. One from SD Cricket Club, who actually won our members league 2 weeks ago. So shout out to him. He had a question, and I think it's a pretty easy answer for me, but maybe not. Larry Fitzgerald and Will Fuller are both on the waiver wire. People dropped them after recent bye
Mm.
weeks. Which one should he pick up to stash? To me, I think it's a pretty clear answer. Lee, do you agree that it's Fuller? Maybe not. Maybe it's not a
My,
clear answer.
I convince me that Will Fuller is going to be on the field for 3 straight weeks. Because that, and
Damn.
I know we hate the whole injury thing, but it just seems so consistent and it's the same thing for him each time. All things equal, without a doubt, Will Fuller, just given the upside of that offense and the way he plays. And honestly, I'm still gonna lean towards Fuller, but I mean, I get the other side of it where Larry Fitzgerald is like the most reliable guy to step on the field on Sunday.
Yeah, I guess I get it. If you desperately need a receiver, I would say go with Fitzgerald because availability is going to be key. But if you have just a roster spot to burn, you're looking to pick someone up just to see if they hit, then it would be Fuller for me. So
Totally. And I mean, his last 3 weeks, he's just due for something. I mean, look, 4 catches, 2 catches, 1 catch. He's had 7 receptions in the last 3 weeks. Like that's not going to continue. He's going to get more of those 5, 6 catch games like he had earlier in the season.
that's
And
true.
they're just going to look to get him more involved. And this is a perfect week for that. If anything, it's like that, like Tampa Bay, what we anticipate this game to kind of like how we anticipate to play out. If I'm not mistaken, highest total on the slate. Like hell, get him this week because
It's true.
he won't be there the week after.
It's very true. That's a
Get
good point.
both guys. I mean, what is it? An 18 league, 10 team league?
I think it's a work league, so you know how those go sometimes.
Nice.
All right, final offline question we got from a follower. You have to pick one PPR this week
Mhm.
to start. It's going to be Joe Mixon against the Ravens, Allen Robinson against the Lions, Curtis Samuel against the Packers.
Whew. That's a tough one, right? Because I mean, Joe Mixon is like, the volume guy, but it's just been so bad. Like, who would have thought? Who would have thought beginning of the season, these are the types of questions we're going to be asking? Like Joe Mixon, a dude who's extremely talented, who got 21 touches last week. Um, scored. You kind of got to go with him, right? But the matchup is horrendous. You got Allen Robinson, who has the worst quarterback in the NFL throwing to him, but has still found a way to be effective. So it's between those two guys for him. And I have Curtis Samuel in both leagues, but um, it's going to be between those two guys. Maybe the tiebreaker kind of comes down to um, if you feel like you need more of an upside play, then you go with Allen Robinson. If
That's
you
fair.
feel like you just need that floor play, someone who's going to get you the volume, then I'd go with Joe Mixon.
I think that's a good way to look at it. We always talk about depending on what your opponent has and what you're trying to accomplish this week. So yeah, I agree. That's a good way to look at it. All right, that'll do it for this week's season-long fantasy football episode. Lee, thanks again for coming back and joining me. Be sure to listen to our DFS podcast, which we are also recording tonight, available in your
Yeah,
favorite
yeah.
podcast app and also on YouTube now as well. You can see our faces as we talk about these scenarios. So for Lead, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening.